this week, kind of about that, and how we need to really welcome that shadow time when it comes.
All good feels the way that I should. Everything is just like I planned. Lifted by grace, I forget to embrace the Father that works from within. Lost in confusion, back in the illusion, slip into darkness again. You've got to welcome the shadow. Step into the light. Is where we find our clearest sight. Rolling along, singing a song, everything's feeling okay. The bills are all paid and the beds are all made. And the sun is shining today. I'm feeling alive, I think I've arrived. Then I forget to check in. I turn on the news, they're all singing the blues. I feel myself tumbling again. You gotta welcome the shadow. Step into the night. Dark is where we find our clearest sight. Do we let the darkness be a place to hide, filled with fear and doubt and deep resentment? Or do we recognize the pathway to the other side and let the night bring peace and deep contentment? We've got to welcome the shadow. Step into the night. Open the darkness. That is where you'll start to listen to your heart. The dark is where we find our clearest sight. That is where you'll start to listen to your heart. The dark is where we find our clearest sight.
Thank you, Chris and Diana and Judy. Yeah. You know, I think we're going to have to give Lori a little bonus. Did you notice the color matching?
No, I didn't.
And I love the reading from Ernest Holmes today. You know, yesterday we were flying out of Seattle, and it had been foggy all day, and as soon as we took off and got just a little bit of elevation, there's the sun. You know, you can look over into the Cascades, and it reminded me of when I used to live there I would oftentimes go spend an afternoon or morning going hiking up into the Cascades. It'd be beautiful and clear and sunny. I would leave the fog of Seattle in the morning. And I would expect that by the time I got finished hiking, it would come back and the fog would have burned off. And I'd get back down to the car and I'd start back down the hill back into Seattle, and there's the fog still sitting there. And that's our life sometimes, isn't it? It's like, we sit in the shadow, not realizing there's this beautiful sunlight we could be in if we wanted to. But we have to do something. We have to move. Sometimes the movement is just in consciousness. Sometimes the movement is physical. But we have to move. So how many of you think I'm going to be talking about the Super Bowl today? Unfortunately, Reverend Sue sort of blew it. Little halo over her head. By telling you that we're going to be talking instead about one of my most favorite holidays. In fact, it is when I was at the Seattle church, Reverend Kathy Ann wanted to co-opt this holiday as the official Science of Mind holiday for the year, the high holy days, and that is Groundhog Day. What she said was, the Christian church has taken away solstice, they've turned it into Christmas. They've taken away Halloween and turned it into All Saints and All Souls Day. They've taken away the celebration of the goddess of fertility, Estra, and turned it into Yeah. So before they take it away from us, we better claim Groundhog's Day. It's called Imbolc for the Wiccans. It's the halfway point between the winter solstice and the spring equinox this weekend. So welcome to it. So we're going to sort of co-opt it today and talk a little bit about the groundhog, because there's so much metaphor, the light and the shadow, that do you kind of get that there could be a little metaphor in there? And then if you throw in the movie, working through this stuff over and over and over again, how many people have lived that movie? In some aspect of your life, And so playing with that and allowing ourselves to experience that. So we're going to use that, and we're going to use it as a metaphor for the 5 stages of the journey of the soul. And we're going to look at that process through the groundhog's eyes, through the groundhog consciousness, because we all have an inner groundhog, don't we? Yeah. The answer is yes. Just like this. We all have an inner groundhog. I got to do an aside. If the 49ers were in the Super Bowl today, we would be in red and gold. I just want you to know that.
And they would be playing like Cowboys who beat them already.
We'll ignore that comment. But I just want you to know we're an equal opportunity spiritual center. We welcome people of all faiths, including those who don't worship at the altar of football. So we've been doing some soul stirring up lately. Have you felt it? We've got the new year, we've got that new consciousness. We did an intentions retreat. 47 people, which is a fourth of the congregation, showed up for that intentions retreat. And when you have that percentage of a congregation show up, it ripples throughout everybody, okay? So even if you weren't there, you're feeling it. We talked a couple of weeks ago about intentions. We talked about dreams and having a dream. We've talked about all that process. We're looking at the process of what's the dream, what's the vision for our community as a whole. We're stirring up the soul that way. Just having a new minister for this past year and stepping into that stirs up the soul. I came in and made some changes, and some people had experiences about those changes. And so, and so it stirs up the soul. It brings up, and what it brings up for us is our shadow. It brings up our shadow side. And so we can do one of two things with the shadow. We can be like the groundhog and run from the shadow, or we can face it down. And so we're going to talk today about the process of looking at the shadow, facing the shadow, not being afraid of it. So we want to understand, it's helpful to understand that there's a process involved, that we're not alone. When we're going through this process, there is a process, there is a map. Even though we have this experience of maybe a dark night of the soul, we're not stuck there. I love that old phrase of, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, because thy rod and thy staff, guide me. The important word in there is walk through. Not set up a 4-star hotel and stay in the valley of the shadow of death. Oh, poor me. Okay? So walking through. You're supposed to laugh at that. So we're going to take a look today at the path, the road map of the soul's journey. We're going to start off with step one. Stage one of the journey is something that was referred to over by our wonderful musicians in the song. And it's called, the groundhog is comfortable in his burrow. We all have a groundhog that's comfortable in our burrow, right? We got everything kind of settled down. I had a couple of those experiences this past week that, my burrow is all settled, and then suddenly I got a call to unsettle my burrow in a couple of different areas of my life, And so we get a call. Sometimes that call comes as a gentle nudge, a little whisper. Sometimes it comes as a little firmer nudge, a shout. Sometimes it comes a 2x4 across the head. Anybody beside me? And sometimes it comes as a Mack truck running through our lives. Anybody besides me? Yeah. And so we get that. We get the call. Oftentimes it comes out of darkness. Oftentimes it comes out of the difficult times in our lives. Somebody who's been addicted to alcohol or drugs for a long time finally says, you know what? I've got to seek help. I can't go on like this anymore. Many of us have had things in our lives where we say, I got to change it. We've had relationships, we've had jobs, we've had health concerns, we've had all sorts of stuff where we say, you know what? I've got to do something different. I got to call. I've been knowing that I'm supposed to do something different for years, and today's the day I'm going to finally say yes, and I do something. I go to a meeting, I go see a doctor, I go see a practitioner to work with my relationship, I go do something, to answer the call. And so that's the important thing, is that we answer the call. Because we get the call, and we can say no. And oftentimes we do. And oftentimes we do when we first get the call. We were on Friday, I was honored to be part of my friend Reverend Heather Venegas' ordination ceremony. She was being ordained into the ministry up in Seattle. That was why I was up there. And for ministers, when we, in the tradition that I came out of, when we're licensed as ministers, it's sort of like the engagement, in a dating situation. You've been dating ministry for a while in school, and then you decide that, yes, I will get engaged to you, I really want to do this, and then you spend about 2.5 to 3 years trying to decide, is this really what I want to do, while also, the overall organization is checking you out, do you really qualify as a minister? And when that all comes together, then you get ordained. We become ordained ministers. And so I was there for her ordination. I was there for her basically marriage to the ministry. And it was a beautiful process. And what she talked about was that the ministry that she is called to now was a ministry that for several years she said, no way, I'm not doing that ministry. And that today is her ministry. When she looked back over her notes from way before that, she noticed that she had been journaling about, this is my call to ministry. She knew it was the call. She knew it was hers to do. And her first response was to say, no way. When we first get the call, sometimes it's so big and so scary, and we sit there and feel so small, and it's like, who am I? We start to say no. But eventually we have to say yes. Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas said, that which is within us, that which is our true calling, will, if we say yes to it, free us, and if we say no to it, kill us. Isn't that a great teaching? And many of us have seen people who, we know them, they walk around, their body is still alive, but they're dead. You've seen people like that? And usually it's because they have said no to their dream. And no, and no, and no. We have a part of our consciousness. The Talmud, the Jewish Talmud, says that there's an angel that stands over every blade of grass saying, grow, grow. And we have that aspect of our consciousness, you can call it an angel or our consciousness, that is saying to us, grow. We're playing in an infinite good. We're playing in a field of the infinite. We have nothing to do but grow into greater and greater good, greater and greater love, greater and greater life, energy, and joy. You want to say yes to that? Yes. Me too. And so that's the call. Ultimately, that is the call. Will I say yes to greater good? And the only way out of that call is through. The only way out is to say yes. And then we move into stage 2 called the search. A couple of weeks ago I talked about Martin Luther King having a dream. We've all heard that talk, that speech of his, that famous speech. And Martin Luther King didn't just have a dream, he did something about the dream. And so that's the search. We start to take some steps. And so search is, I start to find out, how can I sort of answer this call? Not sort of, how can I answer this call? How can I make this dream possible? And so we start to look around. We try and find a path, a way, a teacher, a guide, a mentor. We try and find the process by which we are going to move this from a dream into a reality, into form. And it's worthless until we start to move it into form. So it's the search. We do the search. The search can also be a place where we get stuck. Just like we can say no to our call, we can get stuck in the search by searching and searching and searching and searching. Google. We get into permanent Google mode, okay? We find one more spiritual teacher, one more book, one more spiritual community, one more path, one more teaching. It must be this one. Oh, maybe it's this one. Maybe it's this one over here. And we don't settle down and say, look, I'm going to stay with this one and I'm going to work it. This one seems to be going in the direction I want to go. It's pretty darn good. Maybe it isn't completely, absolutely, totally perfect. Guess what? There is no perfect path. If you're looking for the perfect path, sorry, it doesn't exist. Am I breaking anybody's heart here? No. Okay, good. You probably already know this. We finally take a path and we say, I'm going to work with this one. I'm going to settle down into this one. If you're in this church, you're on a path. You decide that this is a process and a place where you're going to start to work. You're going to start to take the classes. You're going to start to listen to the talks. You're going to start to do the practices and do the processes and move into this. And so you finally come to the point where you're finished with the search, and then you move into the next stage. And the next stage is a dirty, dirty word in religious science. So I'm going to say it anyways. You ready? Brace yourselves. Hang on to somebody close to you. The struggle. Ooh. There's a struggle that we can do that is just a painful dragging a ball and chain around by the ankle and with sackcloth and ashes while beating ourselves over it, walking uphill on broken glass with headwind and snow both directions, okay? That's not what I'm talking about. You've known people who do that, right? I know nobody here ever has, but you've known people. And if not, you know one here. I have done that. The groundhog struggles to break free. He's already started to move up his burrow, and he comes to the opening of the burrow and he finds it's clogged by all the detritus and debris from the winter. And so he starts to clear it off. Our souls, oftentimes, when we start to answer our dream, we realize that our soul process is covered over by old beliefs, old fears, past experiences, the detritus of our winter, if you will. And so we have to clear it off. And that takes a while sometimes to clear it away. And so it's the process of doing the work to clear it away. Do you know what the reward is for doing the work to clear it away? Like the groundhog, we pop out of our hole and we face the light which creates our shadow. And then, like the groundhog, we can get scared and dive back into our hole. And many people do that. They suddenly finally do the work, they come out, they get their magnificence, and they go, oh, God, no, not me, and dive right back into their hole. Now, here's the truth about that. Here's the secret of that. You want to know the secret of that? 6 weeks later, the groundhog comes back out again, right? Supposedly, according to the myth, according to the legend. What's still there? The light and the shadow. Still got to face it. But now the light's brighter because it's more spring. It's 6 weeks has passed. The sun's higher and brighter and all like that. And so therefore the shadow is shorter and darker because there's more intense light. So we got to face it. So my advice is face it the first time out. Ernest Holmes tells us that when we stand in the light, we cast a shadow across the pathway of our own experience. Whose shadow is it? Cast by the fact that we're the light. Emerson advises that we get our bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits. So we find this shadow, and we get to answer the question, am I willing to look at that shadow? Am I willing to face down that shadow? You know, in the Groundhog Day movie, he gets the character that Bill Murray plays, gets to face his non-life affirming behaviors, let's just call it that, okay? His behaviors that don't support the highest expression of life, and he gets to face them over and over and over and over and over again until finally he chooses life-affirming behavior. Many of us have had that experience where we get to choose and experience that over and over again. We find ourselves at this stage in the dark night of the soul experience. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Okay? We find ourselves in that dark night of the soul. We find ourselves moving into the chrysalis experience of the butterfly. The caterpillar has crawled into the cocoon and dissolves into a soupy mess. Some of you know what that's like. Okay? You heard about the two caterpillars who are walking along the ground. They look up and they see a butterfly. And the one caterpillar says to the other, "You'll never get me up in one of those things." We move into that experience, the chrysalis. We move into dissolving. We move into, who am I? I'm no longer who I used to be. You know, I went back to Seattle this week, and I haven't been really back there in a ministerial capacity. Most of the people in the Seattle church have never seen me in a ministerial capacity, because I left right after I graduated ministerial school. I went down to Roseburg. And a lot of them had their eyes open when, you know, we were doing some processes during the ordination ceremony. It's like, whoa, I was a different person, relating to them and to the city in a different way, and they got to relate to me in a different way. When we go through the dark night of the soul, we can be like the Israelites in the desert in the story when they're coming out of Egypt, stuck in the desert. 6 weeks after they left Egypt, they got to the promised land, but they didn't have the consciousness to move in. All they saw was giants and problems and not enough, and they're not good enough, and all this sort of stuff, and that was their consciousness of almost all of them. And so they had to go back and wander for 40 more years, which is basically a generation, which means it's the lifetime of falling away of the old consciousness, the death of the old consciousness. And so a generation of our old thinking has to die before we can move into our promised land. And that's what we call the struggle. And for some of us, it can happen fairly quickly. And for some of us, it takes a long time. I was sharing in the first service that I was called to ministry, if you will. I applied to the seminary to be a priest, a Catholic priest, when I was 13 years old. I had the call from an early day. Blessedly, I was turned down. Today, I'm so grateful for that. But I wasn't ready. I was not ready in consciousness to move into that. And so I wandered for darn near 40 years. In fact, I think it was a little more. I'm a little slower on that learning aspect. Before I finally said yes to ministry and religious science and stepped into that. And so oftentimes we've had the experience of we've had the call, we've tried it before, it hasn't worked out, and then we have the choice of saying, I guess I'm not good enough to do that, I guess that's not my real call, I guess that, we put it aside, or we say, you know what, I need to grow in consciousness to where I am big enough to hold this call and to say yes to it. And so oftentimes we've had a failure experience or multiple failure experiences around our call. I'm going to throw in some football here. I forgot to warn you, a Seahawk might swoop through this talk just for a moment. 2 weeks ago, the Seahawk football team was playing to get into the Super Bowl, the championship game. They played absolutely crappy football for 57 of the 60 minutes of the game. Horrible football. They were down 16-0, and it was a blessing that they were only that far down. In the last 3 minutes, they pulled it out. Okay? They kept on going, they kept on struggling, they kept on working until they found a way. And what was interesting was on the Seahawks sideline, they weren't yelling at each other about all the mistakes that were being made. They were holding each other in faith. They were saying, I believe in you, I know we can do this. The coach was saying, I believe in us, I know we can do this. The coach on the other team, which was winning, was yelling at his players for every mistake they made, which is what most coaches do in football. If you ever watch the sidelines, they're not a real pleasant place to be sometimes. But they stood in that faith, and they talked about it afterwards. They stood in that faith with the whole team. When we're going through the dark night of the soul, it is good to have teammates. It is good to have support. And it is good to have faith. We have in this church, we have practitioners and ministers who will hold consciousness for us to support us. We have a community. That's why we don't do the spiritual path by ourselves. We get support. We get prayer partners. One of the reasons I was at my friend Heather's ordination is she and I have been prayer partners for 12 years. And so we've held each other through ups and downs, her divorce and stuff, my divorce and stuff, and all this walk through ministry and the seeming impossibility of that and holding that. And so that's why you have people who love you and believe in you, and you can lean into their faith when yours doesn't work. Because all of us come to a point where we sit there and go, this is not going to work. I don't believe in my call. I don't believe in me. And that's when you lean into the faith of somebody else who does. Mary Manna Morrissey in the Prosperity Plus class we're taking talks about the Wright brothers who created the first airplane. And both of the brothers had a vision of the plane working. They knew it would work. They could see it in their mind. But they got discouraged sometimes in the process of doing it. Do you know that their father was a fundamentalist Christian minister and told them that they were going to go to hell for trying to fly? They had to move out. Okay, they had to get away from their father, to start that process. How would you like to have to work with that? And so when one of them would get discouraged, the other one would say, have faith, brother, because we've seen ourselves flying. I know we can do this. And it's good to have somebody who has that faith in you and your vision. That's why in the intentions retreat, we went into small groups. That's why we do this leadership community. We don't just sit there and go, hey, what does David want to do for the next 10 years or 5 years? It's what do we as a team, community, a family want to do for the next 5 to 10 years? And so we start to lean into each other's faith, and that takes us to the dark nights of the soul. But we have to also be willing to go through that. Michael Beckwith has a fabulous little phrase that says, a bad day for the ego is a good day for the soul. Isn't that great? A bad day for the ego. How many of us have had ego bad days, but when we get past them and down the road and look back, realize it was one of the best things we could do for our soul growth? Yeah. So we have to allow ourselves to go through that embarrassment, to go through that process, and when we finally do, we hit stage 4, which is the breakthrough. By the way, you can get stuck in stage 3 also, just continuous dark nights of the soul. Poor me, look at how hard I'm working on my spiritual growth. Haven't gotten anywhere, but look how hard I'm working on it. Okay? Don't do that. Because you want to hit stage 4. Stage 4 is where the groundhog is out of his hole and his shadow no longer bothers him. The shadow is irrelevant. We have this myth that says we have to heal every single aspect of ourselves and be perfect before we can have our good. Anybody besides me ever have that program running through their mind? Okay? I got to be perfect before I can have my right relationship, my right job, my right, whatever it is. No, you don't have to be. What you have to be is so in love with the light that wants to come through you, with the call that you want to express, that the imperfections no longer matter because you are focused on where you're going and not where you've been. The call becomes bigger than the shadow. The light is always greater than the shadow. And instead of looking at the shadow and saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, look at that, we are turning to the light and saying, oh my God, look at that. And we start to recognize that, and then we see the light and recognize the light that we see out there is really within us. We are that light. And we look at that and we say, oh my God, look at that. What I would love for you is to be in love with yourself. Your capital S self, you're the light within you, the call within you, that which you are here to be expressing. And when you fall in love with that, you have that breakthrough. And you move into expressing and being in the world who you are. And you move into that world in a way that is freer than you've ever experienced before. Are you open to that?
Yes.
When you do that, you have the experience that Michael Bernard Beckwith talks about. You gain a perspective You guys talked about it a little bit in your song. Darkness and light are both part of our journey. They're both part of our journey. There's nothing wrong with the dark. I love the line, I think, says that's where you get the clear sight. We see clearly in the dark. Darkness and light are both part of our journey. Darkness is the depth of spiritual potential hidden in the void of infinite possibility. Light is the manifestation of that potential in the external dimension of time and space. Darkness is our possibility, but it's our unrealized possibility. It's that which wants to come through, and until we say yes, it just remains there in the void of it's possible. When we say yes, it becomes manifest into three-dimensional form, and we start to walk in that light. That is the light of who we are. And so we say yes to that light. And that's what we experienced in the breakthrough. And then finally we hit stage 5 of the soul, called the return. So we've had this wonderful mountaintop peak experience. We're changed forever. I love it in The Hobbit, in the first movie of The Hobbit, Bilbo, the Hobbit, and hobbits don't like adventure. They're definite, classical, burrow occupiers. I mean, literally, they live in burrows. They don't like adventure. And Gandalf the wizard comes to Bilbo the Hobbit and says, basically invites him on this great adventure. And Bilbo says, "Can you promise me I'll come back?" And Gandalf says, "No. And if you do, you will not be changed. You will not be the same person you were. You will be changed forever." And so that is the truth of our adventure. That is the truth of when we answer the call, is we will come back changed forever. We will be expanded. We will be in freedom. We will not look at the world in the same way. We will be people who can then help others on their soul journey. We will be people who can lift others and be lifted. And then we will be people who will be ready to hear the next call. Because there is always another call. There's a fabulous Zen saying that says when you reach the top of the mountain, keep climbing. Because we're climbing into the infinite presence. We're climbing into that which is beyond our knowing. And so there's always an infinity to climb into. There's always more good, more life, more light, more joy, more bliss. That's the good news. That's the gospel we preach here. Gospel means good news. That's the gospel we preach here. There's more good and more good beyond what we can ever imagine. Are you willing to step into that? Yes. So that's the 5 stages of the journey of the soul. We hear the call. We finally say yes to the call. Sooner or later we say yes to the call and we begin the search. We move through the search, and after the search we move into the struggle. The process of allowing that dream to come into form, and we wrestle with it, like Jacob wrestled with the angel, until finally we have the breakthrough and it shows up in form and it changes us forever. We come back as that changed person and we share our gifts in the world. So my invitation for you this week, your homework, is one thing. Normally I do 3. We're going to do 1. I want you to hear the call. What is it that is calling you? Just listen to that. What is it in your soul that is stirring and saying, I want to come through? I want to close by reading the reading that I had the privilege of reading at the ordination of my friend Reverend Heather, which is The Call by Oriah Mountain Dreamer. So I want you to just take this in. I have heard it all my life, a voice calling a name I recognize as my own. Sometimes it comes as a soft-bellied whisper. Sometimes it holds an edge of urgency. But always it says, "Wake up, my love. You are walking asleep." There's no safety in that. There's no safety in our sleepwalking. Remember what you are, and let this knowing take you home to the beloved with every breath. Hold tenderly who you are, and let a deeper knowing color the shape of your humanness. There is nowhere to go. What you are looking for is right here. Open the fist, clenched and wanting, and see what you already hold in your hand. There's no waiting for something to happen, no point in the future to get to. All you have ever longed for is here in this moment right now. You are wearing yourself out with all this searching. Come home and rest. How much longer can you live like this? Your hungry spirit is gaunt, your heart stumbles, all this trying, give it up. Let yourself be one of the God-mad, faithful only to the beauty you are. Let the lover pull you to your feet and hold you close, dancing even when the fear urges you to sit this one out. Remember, there is one word you are here to say with your whole being. When it finds you, give your life to it. Don't be tight-lipped and stingy. Spend yourself completely on the saying. Be one word in this great love poem we are writing together. That is my invitation for you this week, is to find that one word that you are here to express, to be, and speak it, be it. Spend yourself on that completely. That's a great homework. Are you willing to take it on? Just find that within your soul. Find where you are in that soul's journey and keep moving forward. Let's move into prayer. So I know that there is that one infinite presence, pure spirit, pure love, pure joy, pure oneness, pure good, beyond all of our ideas. There's that lovely poem by Rumi that says, out beyond ideas of right thinking and wrong thinking, there is a field, I'll meet you there. And that field is God's field. That field is the field of the one, the infinite. That presence is all that there is. That life is the only life there is. And each of us is one of that. There is no separation. There never has been a separation from that field. Each of us is one of that, right here and right now. And so I speak my word, that we awaken to our magnificence. We awaken to that word, to that call that is calling each of us uniquely. That the word, that the inflection, that the tonality, that the uniqueness of who we are in this love poem, in this tapestry of life, in this mosaic, in this symphony, whatever metaphor we give it, the uniqueness of who we are, that we are saying yes to that. We are saying yes to it with our hearts full and open, with our beings open. That we say yes to our magnificence, to Spirit's magnificence through us. We don't have to figure out the how before we say yes, because the how will take care of itself. We have to say yes. All it takes is that willingness, and Spirit moves in and starts to move us along the path. Starts to move us up out of the burrow of comfortness, out into the light, past the shadows, and lifts us into that freedom that is our true nature. And so that our burrow expands to include the whole world and ultimately the whole universe. And so we let our souls today expand into the greatness that we came here to be. We let go of all the small talk, all the little chatter of the mind. We say yes in our heart of hearts, our deepest part of our beings. And out of this yes, we move into a gratitude, into a thankfulness for all the good that comes from this, for the blessing that this is for ourselves and for others. Because our yes blesses us and others. That is the way of the divine. And so I take this word and I plant it as a seed into the soil of the infinite law that knows how to move it into form and expression and experience in each person's life here today. That each of us says that yes. And the universe says right back to us, yes, my beloved. You are my beloved, in whom I am well pleased. Dance, sing, speak your word. Be the bliss you are. And it is so. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you.